Show with the Devil. Shortly after, like kind of getting into Aussie and stuff, that's probably within a couple of months, I would say, buddy across the street came over with a cassette and it's like, hey, check this band out. We're just hanging out doing, kid stuff. We're 8 years old, and puts on Show with the Devil. And by listening to the record, how, the intro in the beginning, and so, once again, the apocalyptic kind of evil, sound comes up, and there's that big speech, right? And it really sets a tone for that sound, and not knowing to expect hearing that, and then hearing that, the tune Show the Devil, that big boom, 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 hit, and the drums is hitting on those half notes, right there. I was like, what the hell is this? Right.
And the cover has a pentagram too, right? It's all the same imagery and sound. Yeah.
And this is the thing, is it's like on the cassette version, it was like the inner picture. So it's just a picture of Nikki and Vince, Tommy and Mick, on the cassette. So the pentagram wasn't on the cassette, right? So you see a picture of them. And I'm like, what are these guys? What is the sound? I got to think, I'm 8 years old, never heard of these guys before. Heard a little bit of like, the thing is, into the Kiss, there's a little bit of Aussie, and then these guys come, just like bat out of hell, out of LA, and it's just with this crazy kind of new sound. It's a little bit familiar, it's that heavy metal sound, but there's something different about it, especially with the song like Shout the Devil, right? And the higher vocal events and stuff, which is, at first I was like, I don't know if I like this or not, right? But it grew on me, right? But it was more about just the sound of the record, and it's like the guitar playing, like Mick Mars, man, like just had that wall of Marshall sound, but it was that and the imagery, and just the overall sound of that record, and just that vibe that it just created. Like all those bands that were coming out, like, at that time, like, and I'm talking, we were like within weeks of each other, I'm starting to hear all these bands. Like it was a really short period of time. I heard it was them. And then, you hear like a Rat, and then, it was like Dawkins and come out, and, that whole LA scene, was busting wide open. Wasp, which are one of my favorite bands too, right? Loved Blackie Lawless and Wasp when I was a kid. And that was just all exploding at that time. And, out of all those bands, you can't deny that Motley Crue were the absolute kingpin leaders of LA, crazy LA rock, heavy metal scene. It really changed the landscape for sure.
Yeah, so this is the band's second album. This is considered the big breakthrough. It goes on to sell over 5 million copies and made them kind of the face of that 80s heavy metal scene. You were talking about Mick here. So, when I think of Mick Mars, or when I think of Motley Crue, I don't think of, this incredible guitar playing. But when listening to this whole album, there's like really tasty guitar work on here, and there's some good solo work as well.
Absolutely. That's the thing. He's kind of like this hidden gem. It was the perfect thing for them, because he's just got this heavy-handed like slap about him. There's a thing with the guitar players. It's like, there's guys that are good overall players, right? But we'd say, man, that guy's left hand is something else. That guy's right hand, oh my God. And that's the thing. It's like Mick is that right hand guy, which is like, other guys we'll talk about this guy in a bit, but the Jerry Cantrell, right hand guy, And this is the thing. There's not a lot of super flash on the left hand. It's not about like, this sweep picking and every note is absolutely flawless, perfect, but there's a right hand, and I just call it a swap or a weight. And that's what Mick Mars has. And he just had amazing riffs, it's, you get a little idea from Nikki Sixx. That was, Nikki Sixx was more of a songwriter back then, more he would be a player, and he'd, just be picking out like one finger and a couple of notes, and Mick Mars would take that and just riff on top of it and make those songs what they are, or at least open the door to what they were going to be. Right. But yeah, like, again, Mick Mars in that band, totally different band, might not be, what it was, and they might not be the kings of that, of that little era at that time. Right. They could have just been, they could have been popular, but maybe they just would have been, it's another little cog in the wheel without a guy like that.
So we're as we go, we're going to see a thread that runs through all your albums. Like they all tie into each other in different ways. And for the promotion of this album, Motley Crue was on tour with Ozzy. And what's crazy is the rest of the guys in Motley Crue outside of Mick, they were asking Ozzy's band members if they should replace Mick. So, there's rumors that they've been trying to replace Mick this whole time. They were saying that they were looking for someone more technically great on the guitar than Mick. And it was the bass player who you've mentioned already for Ozzy, I believe.
Right.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, they were asking him, and he said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like they were having such success with Shout at the Devil, and they're like, what are you doing? And apparently it's because of Ozzy's bass player that was the voice of reason that kept him in the band. Had he said something different, they might have replaced him.
Yeah, Bob Daisley, who was on, basically recorded both those records for Ozzy with Randy. Yeah, he's quoted as saying that, like he was approached by the band, be like, who do you know, kind of thing. It's like, why would you get rid of Mick Mars? It's like, really, I don't know what he said. I haven't, dove deep enough to know exactly what he said to those guys, but he, as a good musician and a songwriter and a guy, multiple bands and more of a veteran at that point, he would be very easy to see that Mick Mars is probably the best musician in the band. Not taking
they should be replacing everyone else. Yeah.
Well, then that's the thing, and he couldn't have at that point. Like that's, they obviously realized that they were being idiots, and replace Mick Mars. That could have really just that could have killed their career, But yeah, to not take anything away from Nicky, he had his, his aura about him. That's the thing. He was more of an aura and the rock star and the presence of that band, like and that leader. Right. And you get Tommy, the crazy drummer, phenomenal drummer. We all were like, Tommy Lee is the best drummer, everyone when we were kids. Right. And he really was. He was just such a showman, heavy handed, playing really cool stuff, really awesome fills. We loved it, But yeah, there's nobody replaceable at that point in the band. There really never is. The whole thing, it's like, to go on a little bit about it now, like John Five's in the band now. There's all the drama with Mick, which drives me crazy. I kind of feel like they're ruining their legacy a little bit. The John Five is an incredible guitar player, one of my favorites, right? But replacing anybody in Motley Crue, like, what the point? Just don't do it at all. Just go do something else.
Yeah, Mick has he's had the health issues with his back since he was 17, and I saw Motley Crue in Montreal, I don't know, 15 years ago, and even then he was like completely bent over, and I'm sure it's gotten worse since then. I guess they just announced last year officially that he won't be touring with the band anymore, and apparently he's getting 5% of the upcoming tour that he's not even on, like basically like a parting gift. And that tour is going to make tens of millions of dollars, so 5% is pretty good. But
yeah, by all means he should be, right? He has endured a lot over the years. He's probably put up with a lot of crap because of especially back in the day, and so I'm sure there's still, those guys are all older and they're cleaned up and healthy and all that stuff. I'm sure the drama still continues. I can only imagine, right? But Mick has always seemed like that guy, and there's a lot of support around him for this, where he's just been kind of the rock and like kind of the dad of the band a little bit, right? So yeah, by all means, he should be compensated for the rest of his life for what he's put into that band, 100%. And it's, it's kind of too bad they're going through a bunch of drama and stuff. It just would have been nice, like when they did that big farewell, cease and desist order, the contract and all that. You should have just left it at that. They made enough money, but hey, I'm not there.
Yeah, my understanding is he's quite a bit older than the other members, and way back at the start, he was the stability. Like he's the one that got the funding for the demos. He's the one, like without him, apparently it's like the name of the band, all that stuff goes back to him. And for he says since like the 80s they've been trying to get rid of him, and it's like he's been the rock this whole time.
Right, it's funny to hear all that stuff. Well, maybe it's not funny, but it's crazy to hear that down at the end of the day when he's out of the band and then all the stuff comes out of the woodwork, right? It's like, wow, if we would have known back then, it's like we have had the respect for that band still, if we heard all this back then, right? And you never know, because people do it's not just about the music, man. It's for me anyway. It's like I need to like the band members, and because when they're not good human beings, then the music kind of it wanes, right? It's not as special to you when someone's a dick.
One thing that was kind of shocking to me when listening to this album is when I see the album, so it's called Shout at the Devil. When the song Shout at the Devil starts playing, it's like, oh yeah, like that is Motley Crue. Like to me, that song is Motley Crue. And when I look, the 3 official singles from that album are Looks That Kill, the Beatles cover Helter Skelter, and Too Young to Fall in Love. That Shout at the Devil, their signature song, wasn't even officially a single at that time, and it looks like over the years it had charted to like number 38 or something, like never a significant single, but I associate that song with the band. Do you remember that being like a single, or like how did we get to the point where people associate that song with the band like it's their biggest hit?
Yeah, it's funny. I think it just takes its time, right? Especially being an album track, right? And then people, it's like a deeper listen. It's almost just like they would back then. It would happen a lot. Like they'd have that one like impact tune, right, and then get into the single. It's almost like it was like a setup, like a little lobby. Like, here you go. Here's this aggressive kind of crazy weird song, right? It's not necessarily a radio hit, because the chorus is maybe. They don't think it's as catchy as some other ones, but it's that one should lead off the record, and then all of a sudden, yeah, it's Shout the Devil, boom, and right into Looks Like Kill It, like have that that great riff, and just builds up a little bit, and the chorus is great, big anthem, LA craziness, so. Yeah, it is funny. A lot of bands did do that back in the day, right? And just wouldn't put their first single out as the album track. Maybe they thought it was gonna too much attention and kind of kill it off too quick or something like that, right? They wanted to spread out the wealth a little bit, so to speak.
To further cement your point about the kind of the image they were portraying. So you had, it's called Shout at the Devil. There's a song Shout at the Devil. There's the intro, there's the pentagram. And then what's funny is their cover of the Beatles song Helter Skelter. Helter Skelter is like the most controversial Beatles song there is because of the association with Charles Manson and those murders. So it's kind of funny that that's the song they picked as well, which goes right in there with the image they were portraying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's probably easy for them. It's like, hey, we should do a cover of Helter Skelter, because I'm sure they're all Beatles fans, right? And to be perfect for this vibe, because that's the thing. It's not just as they stumbled upon that. It was like, that was really a vision of Nikki Sixx, like kind of getting into that stuff, right? Getting into a bit of like witchcraft and reading some like novels and something, getting in that dark broody kind of thing. And it just kind of came out of him in the, in the way that he was writing, right? So it was like kind of an aura surrounding them, right? You can hear it in all the songs. Like some of the tunes get away, like Looks Like Kill. It's really not so much demonic, but it's still got that overtone of like, this wicked chick kind of thing, and the video really portrays that too. This girl leader, and they're basically in a fight with her, and she's kind of beating them all up and stuff. It's kind of funny. And you get into songs like Danger, which is really cool song at the end of the record, right? And it's like, saying you're in danger when the boys are around, this is Hollywood. And it's a really kind of like more graphic, kind of gross, at the end of the day. But that was that LA rock scene. It did make everybody feel a little bit uncomfortable, right? That's what everybody was digging, and it gave everybody that kind of it was that mystique, right?
So nowadays we're used to albums having labels that warn you that there's disturbing content or swearing or those things. That's normal. This started back around this album. So this is Tipper Gore back in 1983. He targeted their song Bastard as an example of why there should be labels on CDs. So it's kind of funny that they're the start of that warning label.
Really are. Yeah. And then just a lot of them took a lot of heat. I remember Twisted Sister took a lot of heat, and actually there's a famous a court hearing that he went
to. How intelligent he is. And
yeah. And it was funny because like, I remember first seeing that when I was pretty young. And I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Because it's like, you think this guy, he dressed down a little bit from what Dee Snider, if you've seen Twisted Sister, of course, back in the day, like it's all this crazy Philly stuff and studs and leather and that. And he walks in like in a jean shirt and, it's all denim, and there's kind of down sunglasses. And he just gives this speech that absolutely decimates, their whole rhetoric and what Tipper Gore brought to this whole trial kind of thing. And then, so they settled that the records didn't get banned, but that was what they settled with, was that the PMRC label, basically, which only made kids go out and get their older brothers or their parents to just go get that record more anyway. Right. So it's kind of funny how that worked out. It led to a lot more album sales for all those bands. It really did.
So during the tour cycle behind Shout at the Devil, this is where they became famous and notorious for their bad behavior. They became like the poster boys of every, bad behaved band after that. And I have a few stories that I want to read here that are crazy. So while they're recording, Nikki Sixx gets involved in a serious car crash because he was drunk and he stole a friend's Porsche in LA. So just I'm creating a scene here. Okay. So the drunk driving with the Porsche, then they're on tour supporting Kiss. And you think Kiss is like the craziest of all the bands. After just 5 shows with Kiss kicks off Motley Crue from the tour for bad behavior. So if Kiss is telling you have bad behavior, your behavior has to be just completely insane. And then I'm going to read through a paragraph here. So in 1984, they joined the Monsters of Rock Festival with Van Halen and AC/DC. And Vince Neil and Tommy Lee both bit members of AC/DC and Van Halen, like actually bit to show how crazy they were. Those two bands are so furious. They want Motley Crue kicked off the tour, but Motley Crue is so big at that time that they're having trouble getting them removed. And
or just be like, no way am I going to kick them off this tour.
Yeah. And this is insane. So this is what the promoter came up with to keep them on the bill. I don't even know how they pull this off. The promoter came up with an unusual solution. Motley Crue would enter their trailer immediately upon arrival at the concert venue, and a large crane would then lift the trailer several meters off the ground to prevent the band members from leaving and causing trouble prior to their performance. They physically have to lift them out of harm's way.
I've never heard that story. That's crazy. That's perfect, though. What a great story.
Yeah, that's nuts. And then there's a couple other things. They'd be required to leave the concert venue as soon as they were done performing. They also had to pay a $15,000 deposit before any hotel would allow them to stay because of how notorious their partying is. And then their manager also made each member submit to him a list of everything they had destroyed in a hotel before he allowed them to check out.
Unreal.
Just insanity.
Yeah, they were the Hollywood bad boy, crazy, drug-fueled nut bars, right? It's like, that's the thing. It's like in that scene with that influence, throwing a bunch of kids, millions of dollars, basically, like they're all 21 years old, making $1 million on a rock and roll tour, popular as heck, yeah. Insanity. Yeah. There's probably, I've heard a lot of stories. It's funny. I've never heard that one with the crane. That's a good one.
Yeah, that crane thing is just great. Just to even think of that, like, look, I got them under control because I will physically have them lifted in the air where they cannot hurt anybody else. So I have a few reviews. So Rolling Stone has the album 44th on their list of 100 greatest metal albums of all time. All Music referred to the album as their best, displaying Motley Crue's sleazy and notorious, yet quite entertaining metal at its best. Pop Matters called the album a sleazy and menacing, timeless LA metal classic. In their opinion, the album contained the band's best singles and remains to this day Motley Crue's finest hour. And last but not least, Ultimate Classic Guitar gave much praise to the album, calling it the ultimate LA glam metal album. And they called the band the first heavy metal band to truly cross over from the male to female audience, which automatically doubled the band's fan base building prospects. So that's what I've got for that album.
So, very true and well-written statements, because it's exactly what that is. And that whole thing with the female crossover, that's what it was at the time too. Like when I was, in late grade school and getting into high school, that was the thing, right? It was just as many girls liking heavy metal that it was guys. That was the thing. I really didn't know a lot of people really that listened to much else, right? Because it was just the popular music of that time. Yeah.
Yeah, because we know when you go to a metal show, it's basically you and a bunch of sweaty guys essentially. So for Motley Crue to have equal guy and girl is a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's pretty intense back then, that's for sure. Yeah, I really love the Crew.